I'm happy to introduce Larry Karttunen and Anni Zaenen, who will talk about factive investigations. And as I understand it, Larry will tell you the truth, and then Anni will answer questions about the truth.
So I'll start with some personal memories. I met first Ivan in 1973 at the LSA. I was chairing a session, and there was this person that I was supposed to introduce, and I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce his name, so I went to him and said, well, should I say Sag, or Sag, or Sag, or Shag? Because I know it sounded Hungarian to me. And he directed me to say Sag. And I don't have a picture of Ivan, but I do happen to have a picture of myself, exactly in the clothes that I wore at the time when I was chairing that session. And I mean, the 70s, those were the times. And a year later, Annie meets Ivan in Cambridge, where Ivan co-authors Annie's only term paper on phonology and tries to teach her to play volleyball. It didn't work out so well for the volleyball. And then, thanks to Ivan, Annie and I met in 1975 in Berkeley, where Ivan organized a kind of a counter out at LSA Institute, and Annie was cooking, and there were some 50 linguists eating and talking. Now, in the mid-1980s, we then met again. Ivan was at Stanford. I was at SRI at the time, and Annie at Park. And we all joined forces at CSLI, arguing about HPSG, Patter, and LFG, united against GB. And at the time, we kind of thought that syntax was easy, and with the right tools, we could just develop wide coverage grammars for natural languages, and showcasing the importance of linguistics to natural language processing. Now, it turned out to be a sobering experience. I mean, the most important lesson that we've learned is that there's a lot that we don't know about languages, and a lot of what we think we know is actually false, or at least very incomplete. And the fact is that the natural language processing community pretty much has abandoned taking syntacticians seriously. And now, when they are starting to do semantics, there is a danger that they end up not taking semanticists very seriously unless we improve our act and correct these shortcomings in the field. And I think this is only possible by taking a more experimental direction, as Ivan and others have championed. And this is what I'm presenting is our modest contribution in that direction. And we managed to find a topic that Ivan, to our knowledge, has never worked on. That wasn't easy, but we succeeded. So this is actually collaboration of several, of not just Annie and me, but several other people, in particular Cleo Kondarauti and Stanley Peters. And we'll start with factivity that you all know. I mean, the complement of a factive predicate is presupposed, presented as factual, even when the matrix is a question or negation, like, is it not strange that desire should so many years outlive performance? And presupposition project up from embedded clauses like, I hope it's not annoying that I'm updating my info. And the received wisdom is that factivity is determined by the lexical item, like strange, not strange, annoying, and the syntactic frame. And there is 40 years of literature on this topic. But nevertheless, factivity is not a settled issue. And we are now in the process of conducting a systematic study of factive adjectives using crowdsourcing with Amazon's Mechanical Turk. That's our experimental aspect. And the results show that there are many structural factors that come to play, including tense, mood, declarative versus interrogative, specificity of the subject, the form of the complement, and there are important non-structural features that also affect the judgment. There's a whole zoo of these so-called factive adjectives, and we'll only talk about a couple of them. If we start with audacious, that appears on many lists of factive adjectives, it's actually clear that the tense makes a big difference. If you say, it's a present tense, it's audacious to speak out truth loud. There is no entailment or presupposition that somebody actually does. But if you go to the past, we do get factive reading, but only if we actually have an explicit subject there. It was audacious of John to speak the truth out loud. People will understand that to mean that he did. And in the present, one doesn't really see any difference between so-called supposedly factive, audacious, and one like important that's nobody considers to be factive. Now, we'll zero in first on lucky. And it's a very unique adjective in that it has kind of two interpretations in the affirmative future, and that's important. So there's a kind of pessimistic idiomatic interpretation, like experts will be lucky to eke out any gain at all. The interpretation there is that probably they don't. You'll be lucky to get this person to work for you. It's a really backhanded recommendation. So most likely that will end up not being the case. But then there's also exactly the same kind of sentence with a positive interpretation. So a few kids will be lucky to be cured. The rest will wind up in residential centers. A few kids will be cured. Only one person will be lucky to get such an item. One person will get such an item. And then if you have anything with a question, there's no way of getting the idiomatic, probably not reading. Will they be lucky to see polar lights is a genuine question. Will they see polar lights? It would have been a good thing. It would be a good thing. Now, when we started studying this, we immediately noticed that the curated corpora were not sufficient. I showed you the idiomatic reading and the positive reading, but when you look at the COCA and P&C, you only find the idiomatic reading there for will be lucky. So browsing web turns up data that somehow didn't make it to these collections. And actually, you can also find it even posted on the street. So someone is or will be lucky to have you is the positive regular reading of will be lucky. Now, if you go to the present tense from the future and past, then you only get the positive reading. My son is lucky to have a Japanese wife, and I remind myself that I was lucky to have any time with him at all. Entails that I had some time with him, though curiously you get these negative polarity items that really shouldn't be licensed there. And by the way, all of the examples that I'm presenting you, except the ones that I show in these experiments, were actually from the wild. We only made up data for the experiments. And it's only generic sentences that have the probably not reading in all tenses. So just 100 years ago, a man was lucky to live to be 45, a man in general. But if you have a specific man, like a man was lucky to survive after plunging into the river in Bath, he did. But there are conflicting judgments about both the grammaticality and the meaning of these constructions. So when I was exchanging correspondence with Larry Horn and Craigie Roberts, they were extremely strong in saying, well, maybe be lucky to VPs, that's not grammatical at all. But if it is, then it's only factive. It's always factive. And if you mean the implicative sense, then you have to have enough, be lucky enough to VP. But may be true of their dialect, but if you go to the web, you immediately find examples like, I was not lucky to get a table on this trip, maybe next time. Clearly, the intent is to say, I did not get a table. So, and when I say implicative, what I mean is explained there. So if you have a positive matrix, you entail a complement clause. If you have a negative matrix, you entail the falsity of the complement clause. So in the case of yesterday, she was lucky enough to run into Felicity. She did. He was not lucky enough to fall into easy money. He didn't. And now the question is, what happens if we take away enough? yesterday she was lucky to run into Felicity. Well, she did, but what about the negative? He was not lucky to fall into easy money. Did he or didn't he? That's the issue between the factive and the implicative interpretation. Now, lucky is not alone. If you have, this was the first time I was in Italy and I was brave to go out alone at night. Clearly the intent is to say that I didn't. Luckily, I was not stupid to send them my money. I didn't send them my money. So there is stupid and brave that are supposedly factive, but here clearly being used as implicatives. So we started looking at this issue. We did experiments on Amazon's Mechanical Turk. We had like 350 people. We gave them randomly a sentence like Robin was outraged to see Mary with Bill, and the task was then to, for the Turker, was to decide what the author thought. Did he think that Robin saw Mary with Bill or didn't? And each Turker would get sort of randomly negative and positive instances of the same frame. And here, this is what the first results showed. When you have affirmative sentence like Robin was clever to choose the best piece, 99.5% think that he chose the best piece. But then, curiously, when you take the negative versions, Robin was not clever to choose the best piece, or Robin was not outraged to see Bill with Mary, you don't have 100%, you only have 76% people thinking that it happened. And there we noticed that, well, choosing the best piece would be clever. And maybe that the speaker is saying Robin was not clever to choose the best piece because he didn't do the clever thing. And that became our kind of hypothesis later on. But first we noticed that there's a clear difference between the emotive and the evaluatives. So outraged is solidly factive, both in the affirmative and in the negative. But the clever case flips. So Robin was not clever to choose the best piece, gives us 25% yes and 64% no. So that then we thought might be because of this, that there is a sort of a consonant-dissonant complement hypothesis. If it is clever, stupid, or brave to do something, and one does not have that quality, then one doesn't do X. So it was brave to venture out alone, but I was not brave, so I did not venture out alone, would be the case. And we did a systematic study of that hypothesis. So we took clever and stupid, and then we tried to choose complement sentences that would be generally accepted as being either clever or stupid. And the consonant hypothesis really seemed to work. So if you have something like Robin was not clever to choose the best piece, 64% of the people think that he did not choose the best piece. So the pluses and minuses, they sort of indicate cleverness. But when you have Robin was not clever to choose the worst piece, people think that's factive. Kim was not stupid to save money. Well, he was not stupid. Not saving money would be stupid, and we get the defective interpretation winning. But when we have Kim was not stupid to waste money, it's the implicative interpretation that wins. I could say more about that, but I will go on. Back to Lucky. So the result of the previous slide shows that there are non-structural factors that are involved with clever and stupid. And there are non-structural effects with lucky as well. So when you have, I hope that she'll be lucky to die instantly, it seems to mean that what I hope is that she will die. She will die instantly. But I'm afraid that she'll be lucky to die instantly. It's the other interpretation that wins. The idiom comes back. So there's a difference between verbs like hope and wish that indicate preference, and verbs like be afraid and think that are about opinion. And this is quite important to really get this right. I mean, it's important to figure out what are the non-structural factors that play a role in the interpretation of these adjectives, and it raises the question of, are there really purely lexical factives at all? There are certainly candidates left, mainly the that factives. And the inference tasks are very popular in NLP circles these days, and some of the features you study right from the classification of lexical items that typically come from linguists, and certainly the results will be better if the classification is correct. And here are some references.
Thank you for finishing exactly on time. A model for us all. Questions?
So just a short one. I'm wondering why you looked at outraged at all, because that just doesn't seem to be in the same class syntactically as the lucky, wise, and all those things. It was brave to leave. It was brave of John to leave. It was lucky of John to leave, and so forth. But not it was outraged of John to leave. I mean, you just don't get.
Well, you get he was outraged to see.
I know, but it doesn't. It's not. But in the other ones, you get these other things like leaving was brave, or it was brave of John to leave. And outrage just doesn't. Outrage, angry, and some other ones just don't occur that way.
There is a difference between the emotives and the evaluatives.
Right.
And that is exactly what plays a role here. But they have both been classified as factive. So we just now notice that indeed you get that the difference.
Okay. I mean, it just doesn't surprise me that you get that.
No, well, and once you start to think about these things, then they don't surprise you. But if you look at the literature, then that is what you find, and what you teach your students is the wrong thing.
I mean, outrage is not the only one, of course. There's surprise, for example.
Right, that whole class.
Flabbergasted. The whole class of kind of emotive reaction to something that...
But I mean, they have just a whole sort of host of differences with these other things that...
Yeah, but the differences that have been noticed among these differences is not factive. I mean,
Okay, I'm just suggesting that it might tie into this host of other differences as well.
yeah, sure.
Other questions? Yeah, Peter.
So what is factivity?
Factivity stays the same. The question is now, what is factive?
And then what is fact?
Well, I mean, to what extent does it depend on the particular lexical items and constructions? I mean, I think that there are things that are really factive, but a lot of things that have been so labeled actually aren't. There are other things that get involved. Certainly with clever and stupid.
If you take something, it is surprising that John went and so forth. Those ones tend to be. Roger?
I'm wondering, is it across the board the case that the evaluatives have enough? Is it like there's another construction with enough clever enough, stupid enough?
Yeah.
This looks a little bit like, basically like, one hypothesis would be that there's, in real-time language comprehension, sometimes you may ignore individual words. It has some recent work that really beautifully illustrates this, that people interpret ditransitives in the wrong way, based on the prior probability of the two alternative constructions. And it looks like basically here when you have in the evaluative cases, the prior probability of the prior coherence of the two interpretations is really doing all of the work here. So I wonder if that's superficial.
That's basically what we say. It is the prior coherence that does the work. So we agree definitely with that. That is the consonant hypothesis. But we looked at the things within enough. So we asked people. This is not what we have numbers about here. But we did another test where we had these sentences, and then we asked people after they had said that they gave the the implicative interpretation, say, would you say that yourself, or would you say something else, okay, to express that idea? And then a certain percentage, could I get this other thing here? A certain, next one. And then a certain percentage of these people said, no, we would put in enough. But 20% would still say, sure, what are you talking about? And you can see this kind of a similar thing here. How do we get the next thing here? Here, okay, kind of, you can see here that we have here, you have these people that even when the consonant hypothesis doesn't hold, they will give the implicative interpretation, okay, 10% there, okay, will give in this particular case. And here it is these 14% here. So it seems to be that there are kind of real implicative speakers, and then there are the speakers that are the factive speakers, which is the majority, and then there are the people that actually adapt themselves to the situation. They say, okay, we might be factive speakers, but when we hear this, then because of this consonance idea, we will understand that this speaker is an implicative speaker, and we all interpret that way. So that is the one of stuff.
Let's thank the speakers.